and I haven't done this, and then you hear all the excuses that we touched on again last week. So that was a quick recap on week 1. I'll introduce week 3 when we get to the end of this session. But as I said, without setting him up for failure, because I know he won't anyway, this individual, this gentleman, has a far better CV than me, because he has made it to the world stage. Lee Mears is a very, very highly thought of businessman. I'll tell you about what he does now. But formerly, for those of you who don't know Lee, he was a very highly capped Bath rugby union player, and played for England. I think something like 170 caps for his club. And I don't know how many for England, but it was a lot anyway. And quite remarkably, for a relatively slight guy, he played hooker. And I can't even imagine what would be going through my head if I had a man running at me who was 6'4" and something like 140 kilos. But Lee did it week in, week out, and he survived to tell the tale. So there's got to be a degree of resilience about Lee Mears. And what he does now, and has been doing since he retired from professional rugby and from the international scene, is he now coaches successful people, businessmen and women from up and down the UK and across the world. And I'm very proud of the fact that Lee is my personal development coach. Now, lots of people say, Sandra, what on earth do you need a personal development coach for? Because, you know, your business does well and you coach other people. For reasons you are about to find out, all of us need a personal development coach. And that's really the main reason I extended this opportunity to all of you through IG, to really give you a flavor of personal coaching. This isn't training to me, because I know that every one of the 156 or 7 of you that is on this program for 10 weeks already has the innate ability to be anything you want to be in this business. But this is about pushing from behind rather than pulling from the front. This is about trying to help you develop the skills that you all undoubtedly have. And whether I get a question saying, I'm really struggling at the moment, once I start getting into the detail behind that question, I find out quite quickly that actually the person is very competent, has the world at his or her feet, just needs a little bit of a steer. Sometimes just to look at some of the things that they used to be doing that were really successful, that they just forgot about for whatever reason. And so I think we all need to be accountable. I think we all need a personal development coach. So as I said, no expense spared. I've managed to persuade Lee to give up some of his very valuable time to join us for week 2, because as an endorsement to one or two of the things that we said last week, but as a perfect segue into week 3, which you'll come on to find out about at the end of the session today as I introduce week 3, Lee Mears, I couldn't wish for anyone better to join us. And this is a world first. I've never had Lee join us on a masterclass whenever I've run the masterclass anywhere in the world. So I'm not going to steal any more of his thunder. But as I said, I owe a lot to Lee in terms of my own personal development in life and business. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Lee Mears to you all. Please, can I just ask you to do one more thing from a housekeeping perspective? Please make sure you stay on mute, because Lee and I will be sharing screens and sharing the microphone, and it's all going to get very chaotic if we get lots of background noise. So if you could do that for me, great. And one other thing I'm going to do is ask you all to participate as actively as you wish to by using the chat facility. We will do our best to translate the French. I still remember a bit from school, but we'll do our best to handle as many questions as we can. So today is going to be as interactive as you'd like it to be. So Mr. Lee Mears, my personal development coach and coach extraordinaire, welcome to the masterclass and to a very fabulous group of people who will be no doubt keen to learn from the master of his trade.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me along, Sandro. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm quite excited about this evening. You know, I want to be honest and open. Canada is one of my favorite countries in the world. Having been over there for rugby tours, Vancouver Island has a special place in my heart, but also when I was lucky enough to go up to the North Pole, which is something we might talk about later on. And instead of a bit of a world record, we had to go up through Canada. So I've got some wonderful memories of the people and the place. So thank you for having me along. When Sandro asked me, I couldn't refuse. I was very much looking forward to it. I suppose going back to Sandro earlier, sort of saying about what I do now. Yes, I come from a high performance background, a sporting background. It made me smile earlier, Sandro, when you mentioned the 10%ers. We actually spent most of our career trying to find the 1%ers that make the real difference at that high performance level. And I loved the fact that you can always improve, that love of learning. And it's one of the reasons why I ended up becoming a coach, because I think you're always constantly improving, and the more you want to learn, the better it is. And hopefully today, what we're going to cover is 3 things really. We're going to look at, when you coach somebody, you look at the person, we look at the role, and then we look at the systemic piece. So personally, what is it about you? What are your strengths? What are your loves? What are your passions? What trips you up at times? Your role, how do you improve in your role? What is your role? What are the elements that you can really go after? And then the system. So what systemically are you trying to achieve? And hopefully, I think coaching nowadays is becoming more and more prevalent in life. And I think hopefully some of these skills you can take away, not just to in work, but in relationships, in life in general. There's all sorts of things that you can use coaching. And people ask me, why is coaching become, it's just a buzzword, or is it just popular? And I think what's happened before, and where we've sort of evolved, is that it was quite industrial before. It was very easy. You turned up, especially as we've seen in COVID, but you turned up at 9, some a lot earlier, 8, 7, and 6, and you left at 5. Sorry, I was just reading the message that somebody can't hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if you can all hear me, for people with the screen. Yes, perfect. But it was very sort of industrial. So you turned up, you delivered, you were measured on your capacity to deliver, the time you spent in the office. Now I believe that sitting at your desk, that churning stuff out has changed. Problems are different. Problems are more complicated. And when you're trying to create and solve complicated problems, it takes more than one person. It takes a think tank, diversity of thought, diversity of people. And this is one of the things that coaching really opens up, because you start to be, one of my favorite phrases is be curious. How can you solve stuff? What's going on in somebody's world? What's going on in your world? Curiosity is an absolute empowerer to relationships and to business. So tonight, stay curious. Ask lots and lots of questions. And you'll see when we talk about coaching, it is about questions. So me preaching to you won't be the best for the whole 2 hours. So ask as many questions as you want, and we will go off on this journey, because I want this to be as relevant as possible to you all. People ask me again what the difference between coaching and mentoring is. And I actually say, if you want to go somewhere super fast and you want to get to the top of your game, because that's what coaching is about. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And the steps that you're going to get there. I think you mentioned last week, Sandro, didn't you, about making New Year's resolutions and how do they drop off? So one of the things about coaching is that you've actually got someone is accountable and holding you to account, but also probing you and pressing you and sort of saying, is that what you say? If you really, really want to succeed, I also recommend actually sometimes grab as many mentors as you can, because mentors are people that have been there, they have done it, they will impart their wisdom on you. They'll tell you what, generally my favorite bit is tell you what mistakes not to make. And a bit like this, the masterclass that you're getting from Sandro now, picking Sandro's brain around that mentoring bit. But as I say, if you can combine the two and you can focus on coaching, I think it's a really, really powerful, powerful compliment. And where I bring this up, I want to sort of say this in life, because I also think life is very important as well as business. But you imagine in a relationship, and I'll just talk about the difference between sort of coaching and counseling, and you might see in relationships. But so often people go, "Oh, I'm having a bad day," and someone else will come up to you and they'll say, "Oh, I'm having a bad day too." For me, you're going nowhere, or, "Oh, I'm having a really bad day. The weather's rubbish." "Oh my God, yeah, you should see what," this is the UK people mainly. The weather's rubbish here as well. See, that's sympathy. It doesn't get you anywhere. For me, coaching is about dragging that person forward. "Oh, the weather's bad, but what can you do about it?" In your control? Is it not in your control? Like Sandro said earlier, is it your mindset? And how do you start asking those types of questions that can really draw things out? So we're going to talk a lot about coaching and why it's really important, or the benefits of it. And then we're going to look into some of the other bits. One of the things I wanted to ask Sandro, when you asked me to come on, what's been the big difference for coaching for you? Why have you enjoyed coaching? How has it helped your practice?
Well, for me, Lee, I think, and any one of you who've had a coach before will probably agree with what I'm about to say. For the last 12 months, actually, I have employed the services of a personal trainer. I built a gym at home. None of us were getting out to the gym, and I'm the wrong side of 52. So I figured that if I put on any body fat at the age of 52, I probably wasn't going to lose it very quickly. So I decided to get ahead of the curve and to take some positive action and be proactive. So I've engaged the services of a personal trainer. And I've trained every single day, 8 till 9 for the last 50. In fact, we were celebrating our anniversary last week on the 14th of April. That's exactly 1 year, every single day. But in all seriousness, in the same way that kind of we all rock up at the gym, well, not all of us, but most of us, or we think about physical fitness, all too often, Lee, and I'm sure you know this in your experience, and particularly given your sporting background, you don't become an England rugby player unless you've got supreme mental strength. And so the personal development side for me was about complementing the stuff most of us take for granted, which is go to the gym, eat healthily, stay fit, do all the things that we want to do physically. But it was about, growing my mental strength, about creativity. And as you alluded to earlier, that the same accountability that I have to a personal trainer. I mean, I would not get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym every single day unless I knew somebody was there waiting for me. So working with you has given me the opportunity to say, because it's very hard to make an excuse to another person, very, very easy to make an excuse to yourself. So, some of the exercises, which I know you're going to cover today, some of those exercises you've taken me through have really taken me to a new place in terms of the way I think about things. And since we started working together quite some time ago, more and more people interestingly say to me, "Gosh, you're always so positive." And it's not because I was born like that, or I've consciously thought about getting up in the morning going, right, today's going to be a great day. It's just become kind of a subconscious part of who I am, because I have that mental strength and that mental resilience to overcome the knocks and the challenges which inevitably we all discover and come across from time to time. So I think in a nutshell, Lee, that would probably be the main parts of it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I love the bit you sort of you highlighted there as well about moving you to the next level. And some of the reasons that coaching is important is because, and people sort of say to me, "Is it remedially? Oh, what problem are you trying to fix?" And I always sort of twist it around and sort of say, I think you'll find that coaching at the top level, and I'm not saying you all want to be elite sportsmen, but you want to be the best. We only get one life, and you want to be the best that you can possibly be. And as human beings, sometimes, and we'll cover it later, our brain does like to hold us back. It likes to keep us safe. It likes us not to have challenges. And by having a coach, I think sometimes coaches help you address those bits that you are there, but you can function, you can get by. Whereas I think some of those traits, I call them negative cycles. You have the cycles that repeat, and you end up with the negative outcome from these repeated cycles. I think coaches help you to identify those. And I always use a bit of a golf analogy, where, someone comes along and says, right, I want to get from double figures down to single figures. And Sandro, you know this being a golfer, and it's a few tweaks. And so someone will video you, they'll say at the top of your backswing, hopefully we've got some golfers here, you're at the top of your backswing and you just need to make a tiny adjustment. And that tiny adjustment is not normal and it's awkward. And you go, oh, I don't know if I want to make it. I like what I do now. I like the way I operate. And this is where coaching comes in. Coaching is the bit that says, if you don't change that one tiny bit or give it a go, test it, you'll never make those gains. You'll never make those gains. And I'm here to help you, to show you, and sometimes to hold the mirror up. And this is what we'll talk about later on this evening, or for us this evening, but for you today, those mini tweaks and why they're so painful and dealing with change.
Lee,
yeah.
can I just jump in, because just to touch on that, and I know the other thing, because a number of you, and I would like to call some of you my friends, because we're in regular contact with one another, and hopefully we'll all become friends over time. One of the things I hear more and more and more is, overcoming the challenges of, I fear prospecting. And I've heard, I think half a dozen times this week, I've got a prospect list, I've got a big bunch of names, and it all looks terribly exciting, but I fear or have anxiety around calling those names, because if one of them or more of them say no to me, then they're not prospects anymore. And I don't have this really exciting list of names anymore. And that's an inherent part of who we are as human beings. It's a natural instinct. The reason I'm mentioning this as an example is that, if you don't mind me saying, Lee, I know you're stood up, it's very difficult to tell how tall you are, but it would be fair to say you are not 2.5 meters tall. It would also be fair to say that you're probably about 70 kilos dripping wet, I should think. And that leads me to an obvious question, and I alluded to this in your introduction. I asked you, I did a podcast, and all of you will be getting a copy of the podcast I did with Lee. It really is a brilliant podcast. If you want to get into the mind of somebody who sees a brick wall, who sees an obstacle and just runs through it, Lee Mears is the guy. So I guess my question to you, Lee, is, there you are, a fairly slight guy, certainly in your rugby days, one of the smallest men on the pitch, and yet you've got somebody who's twice the size of you, running towards you at probably 23, 24 miles an hour, with a rugby ball tucked under his arm. Most people would be forgiven for just standing aside and, waving the guy through, but you have to hit him hard and you bring him down. How mentally do you do that?
Well, firstly, I think I do suffer from angry little man syndrome. But I think it probably stems from childhood. I was always told growing up that I'd be too small, and that you're not going to be big enough. Yes, you're good, you've got basic skills, but you're not big enough. You're not big enough. You're not big enough. And so that for me was always a thing in the back of my mind. And again, going back to your mindset piece last week, you can either use that to fuel you, or you can let it be the undoing. And I talk about, you can either be the victim in your world, where it's done to you, people say things to you, it's out of your control, or you can be the player and you can be the person that really makes the difference. So I think for me, it became about sort of attitude. And I'll put a slide up of something I sort of lived and died by, but I found very quickly that playing professional sport, it was about your role. It was about being the best you could be. It was, as in terms of being an advisor, it was about having the right qualifications. But there was this extra little bit, and that for me is the attitude. And having played all the way through, I can honestly tell you now that the top sort of 50 players that I played with across the world probably weren't the most talented youngsters. They weren't your firsts at Cambridge. They weren't your fittest, your fastest. They had elements. You have to have those capabilities, but it was the attitude of the players, because quite rightly, professional sport is actually more about how you deal with failure and loss than how you enjoy the wins. I think we are addicted as pro sports people to failure. And someone sort of highlighted it to me. A psychologist once said, if I had the opportunity, me personally, to beat my son every night and put him in his place, which, don't get me wrong, I do like to keep him in his place and beat him at tennis. But if I had the chance to play him or go against Rafa Nadal, I would get absolutely annihilated by Rafa Nadal, but I would at least want to get better. And some people are quite happy winning at a lower level. Some people are like, no, what can I learn? Hammer me again, hammer me again. And that for me is we have a lot of reality TV in the UK. And you can always see when an ex-sports person or a dancer or an actor or even a musician, it's how they deal with feedback. They can be absolutely rubbish. The judges rinse them and they're like, oh, give me some more feedback. Oh, give me some more. I want to know some more. Give me some, because it's all about elements, how to grow. What element can I use about this feedback to grow, which again goes back to the mindset. But I just want to share with you, Sandro, because it sort of links to one of the slides that I've got. This was a slide, and I know, and I'm sorry I talk a lot about sport, but can you see that okay? Thumbs up if you can see my slide, just so I've got, yes, perfect, thank you very much. Now, hopefully, as numbers people and mathematicians and financial advisors, you'll like my slide, because it's got a bit of an equation. But this was stolen from Sir Alex Ferguson, and in the UK he's highly regarded. Even in America, Harvard have asked him to do some studies because he was an amazing leader. And he talked about this equation, which is performance. What you're always looking for is capability. Yeah, you need capability, but it's times attitude squared. Attitude is worth double. Whether you're leading a team, whether you're the athlete yourself, or whether you're the worker, your performance, you're all capable, and you can dial up capability. You can learn, you can do exams, you can, upskill, but attitude is people out of 10 on both areas. And he said, you probably will only ever have one 10 out of 10 attitude and 10 out of 10 capability in your whole career as a football manager. He said, I only ever have one player like that, and it was Cristiano Ronaldo. But 10 out of 10 attitude. And so often, some teams that I know and some individuals, they think that 10 out of 10 capability will get them everywhere if they've got a 2 out of 10 attitude. And it just doesn't work like that. So this is is that when you're trying to lead yourself, what's your attitude? What's your mindset? When you're trying to, if you lead a team at the moment and you're a leader, what is the capability of your team, but what's their attitude like? I imagine most of you have never had to let someone go or fired someone because of lack of capability. Got to coach it out of them. You've got to start to ask really inquisitive questions. So I'll just get that down. Any questions about that, Sandro?
No, in fact I was having a bit of a cold sweat, Lee, because my internet connection just dropped off a little bit. I hope it didn't affect anybody else, because it seemed like you just carried on regardless. But hopefully it was just me and no one else.
No, you're fine.
Good.
So yeah, so that's the piece for me around that the mindset, the attitude, and then from there, it's taking a sort of a next step where on my journey with you, Sandra, and what I'm always looking for as a coach. I'm always looking for, where are you? Where are you at the moment? And like you said earlier, what are those 10%ers? What are those bits that you need to really, really work on? And then where do you want to be? So you can actually reverse engineer it a lot of times. And this was, someone's just asked about the $1 million question, how to change attitude. We can definitely change someone's attitude. And I'm going to come on to that now. When you're working with different people, you want to really sort of unlock the attitudinal piece by asking these the questions. So I would always be asking teams, what are the best teams? What are the elements that make up great teams? And obviously in sport, it's a lot easier to measure. So I sort of use the analogy because we learned a lot from the military. The beauty of sport, and I mentioned the 1%ers earlier, is we were always trying to steal ideas. We were never the experts. We were going, right, what can we learn? Who can we learn off? Whether we went to Goldman Sachs in the UK, who at the time were highly regarded as a banking firm, whether it was the military, whether it was GSK was another firm that we sort of kept an eye on, but we'd always go and try and find out what they were doing that we could learn from. And for me, the military were amazing. They used to say, we're so similar, and I'd say, no. If you make a mistake, you die and get shot. If I make a mistake, I just get abused by 80,000 people in the stand and a few million people in the press. But they helped us to really hone in on what are the key steps that you want to sort of go after. And so I've given you a bit of homework that hopefully you will all do. And it's called the Wheel of Life. And you'll see it in your workbooks. And hopefully some of you might have seen it before, but it's a wonderful pie chart. And the idea is that you fill out where you are in your life at the moment. And you can put any different area, any different bits. And the reason I call this the Wheel of Anything is because you can do it for the Wheel of Life, you can do it for the Wheel of Role, and you can use it for all sorts of things. And as you can see there, and what I'm going to ask you to do is to just go through the different elements that you think make up your life. So life purpose, what do I score myself? Am I on track? Am I living up to my life purpose? Personal improvement, am I improving? How do I score myself? And where some people go a little bit wrong with this is that we think that we want 10 out of 10 on everything, but you can't. You can't be 10 on 10 with everything. But what you can start to do is start to look at, where are your key areas? Where are you surprising yourself? Where are you a bit upset about? And what do you need to start dialing up and dialing down? So for instance, you could be doing really well, for instance, or for work. So a lot of times finance, career contribution, 10. Yeah, I'm absolutely nailing at work. The likeliness is, if you're nailing at work, you might be on a 2 in family and relationships. And where you can bring this into then coaching is you can start to say, which ones am I not happy with, and which ones do I need to focus on to improve? So for instance, family relationships, if you're a 2 in family relationships, I would never as a coach come along and go, right, how are we going to get you to 10? Because you'd literally be like, oh no, too far, too hard. And this is what we talk about with goal setting when Sandro was saying the SMART goals last week. Realistic. So I'd be saying to you, what have you got to do to get it to a 3 or a 4? I know you want it to be a 6 or a 7. You know, what are the small bits? So when you filled this out, ideally you do where you are now. Then you put on the outside where you want to be. And then you start to look for the gaps. what do I need to do? Where can I close them? And which ones will have a massive effect on me?
Lee, would you mind just repeating what you just said in terms of instructions? Because to let everyone know, the Wheel of Life won't be in your workbook, but it will be sent to you with the recording of this session as part of your homework piece. Sorry, I call it action plan rather than homework because you're not all back at school. Lee, if you just repeat, so there are two things that need to go onto the Wheel of Life. It's where they are right now, scoring in a brutally honest way, and where they would like to be in terms of immediate improvement. And then, of course, the gap then is identified as being the space between the 2 points, correct?
Yes, yeah. So again, go round that grid, scoring yourself out of 10, where you are currently at this snapshot in time. So for me, as being in the UK, I've obviously been, I've been very much missing friends and associates at work. So I might even score a 2. And then, but in terms of family life, I've been around a lot. I think even my children have had enough of me now. So that might be quite high. But this is a really good tool because you can constantly work out, where are you? What do I need to flex? Because I do find a lot of life stresses at the moment are, have I got balance? I hear this a lot, is my work-life balance? And the reason it's called balance is because it's bloody hard work. It's like being on a tightrope. And sometimes you'll be doing really well in one area and sometimes you'll be not doing well in the other area. And I think if you can use this as a bit of a graphic equalizer, how can I improve in this area? Or I now know, because we talk about future focus, where do I want to be? 3 years time, I'm going to absolutely have to nail my, I'm just looking here, my career contribution. I'm going to have to literally go after this. For someone who is in their 30s and having, children, all of a sudden you start to go, well, actually, I might need to maximize work because I'm just about to have kids or I'm just about to purchase a house. Where am I in my world? And what do I really need to focus on in order to get where I'm going?
And Lee, another thing, if I can just jump in terms of my own practical experience of using this with you, 2 quick things to say. Number one, if you complete this wheel and you score significant other as anything less than 10 and make the mistake of showing it to him or her, you will be in a lot of trouble. So don't fall into that trap. But on a serious note, the reason we are going to be revisiting this in week 9 is that hopefully everyone can track their progress. And what's really important is moving forward. This is not an exercise for today that then gets put to one side for 5 years. This is something you should be looking at, arguably every month or 2, so that you can identify the areas that are starting to slip again. Because obviously, if you've got 15, 16 plates that you're spinning, and that's part of the challenge of running a life and a business, inevitably, like those plates that you see clowns spinning at a circus, you can focus on one to the detriment of another. That starts to wobble and eventually falls over. So what I love about this is I regularly score this. Just when I think I'm doing well at something, I actually realize if I'm scoring honestly, actually I've slipped back a little bit and I now need to readdress that particular objective.
Yeah, and I think someone's quite rightly, Darcy there, just asked respectfully, how would an atheist rate the spirituality part? Sorry, I can't even say it, spiritual part. Is that this wheel, as I said, can be anything. I mean, I don't want to drag you too far away, but you could actually do this for your role. So what is my role at work at the moment? What are the 8 elements that make up me and my job? So, clients, back office, connections. You can use this for anything. So I've just given you some guidance, because I think if I put up a blank one, people might go, oh, what am I going to put in the different areas? And that's why you can actually narrow it down to your world. I mean, some of you won't be interested in, I'm just looking there, you might not be interested so much in mental and emotional health. You may think physical health and fitness is the key. So you'd put whatever's in your life. It's your life wheel and the key bits. So So yeah, hopefully that's okay and that makes sense. I'm just checking if there's any more questions. Does anyone have any questions with that? Now, hopefully what we're going to do is week 9, I'll come back and we'll start to have a look at by seeing, just bringing it in the forefront of your mind. Hopefully then you'll be able to address some of these bits. And again, that's something that we're going to cover as we go on throughout the evening. Sandra, you made a really interesting point that I just want to pick up earlier, and it was around sort of the health side of things. And I always find this really interesting. And again, one of the reasons why I think the Wheel of Life is so good is most financial advisors that I've met, I'm lucky enough to work in a few family offices, and financial advisors are very much around, you're giving advice. And I think sometimes my experience, and it's only my humble experience, that in family office, you have lots of advisors coming in. And, oh yes, we can sell this, we can sell, we can. And there are some of the family offices that all they care about is money. But at times, I do think that and you mentioned right brain, left brain earlier, I do think the financial advisors that get in the door with family office stuff are generally the ones that almost take a coaching approach of, what do you want to do with your money? What is it that you are really trying to achieve? And then drill down into the even deeper questions of, what would you like to be known for? Are you trying to leave a legacy? And I know there are different types of clients, but I think that the people that ask those questions are the ones that I find get the stickier, deeper relationships with the clients. And sometimes it's gimmicky tricks. Like if someone mentions their child's name or their wife's name, you remember that name and you replay it later. Some of these actually really, really, work. And I think it goes down into building trust.
Lee, just to pick up on a couple of things, I want to make sure we stay on top of the chat as well. Charles has quite rightly pointed out that there are 7 steps on the wheel. We refer to, the 10 out of 10. I think that was more as an example. The point with the wheel is that we are creating a scoring system. It doesn't matter whether it's 0 to 10 or 0 to 7 or 0 to 3, whatever you want it to be. We're really just trying to identify where we are right now, which most of us don't ever stop to think about. I'm far too busy to stop and think about these things most of the time, which is why I have Lee by my side. And Marco makes a very good point. Of course, there may be certain aspects of the wheel you're perfectly happy with, in which case, no need to score them, no need to identify where you are right now, or the color that you use to identify where you are right now will be exactly the same color as the one used to identify where you want to go, because it's exactly the same place. So if you're happy with, for example, your financial position, then obviously no need to work on that. The point that we're making here is that this helps you to identify areas of your life and your business that need attention, because it's very easy to lose sight of that. That would be number one. And then again, with the right left brain thing, and going back to something that was mentioned again on the chat, can attitude be learned? I'm using a paraphrase here, but I absolutely believe, and I know you do, Lee, because you've taught it to me, attitude can be learned. Like you learn, as I said last week, to walk, to talk, to swim, ride a bicycle. If you repeat a process, in this case, the process of success, over and over and over again, it becomes a subconscious habit and you do it without thinking. And that's what this program is very much designed to do, is to give you not just the skills and the foundations for the right attitude, but to combine the two through repetitive positive action, so that when you start your day, you repeat that process of success over and over and over. And it's the one commonality amongst all successful people that I've ever met. They just do it without thinking. Like Lee would tackle somebody twice his size without thinking, because to use him as a good example, if he stopped and thought for one split second, this guy's going to run straight over the top of me, he wouldn't stand a chance. but something happens mentally that says, and I remember from the podcast, you said, in your mind, I was exactly the same size as him. And I think that's a really good way of summarizing what we're talking about, where we're trying to get people to in terms of this program. Would you agree, Lee?
Yes, definitely. I think someone once used the analogy with me of I was like a dachshund, and I don't know any dog lovers out there, but it's a really small dog, and but it hangs out with Alsatians, and it thinks it's an Alsatian, but it's definitely not. So I was this small person, and I remember from my my parenthood days, my dad sort of telling me one day, because I was really upset about not being the tallest, and he said, it's not about the size of the dog in the fight, it's about the size of the fight in the dog. And for me, that sort of stuck with me as a life lesson going through. But hopefully with that wheel, sorry, I may have may not made myself clear, is that with a coach, what I'd be trying to do, and hopefully you'll get this experience, is by getting it out of here and down onto the page. There's something amazing about the power of the pen, whether you make notes in the evening or whether you keep a journal, but there's something about getting them out and writing and drawing, especially, and I'm making a massive generalization, but in finance, we are quite left brain, we are quite logical, we do like things to add up and be black and white. And sometimes I'm terrible at sort of drawing and doing anything creative, but getting it out makes you look at it from a different way. And it's one of the things that I would probably be doing with Sandro quite a lot, is taking him off the treadmill and using this tool to just say, look, Sandro, where are you going again? What are you trying to do? What's the year? What's the 3 years looking like? And is this wheel a fair reflection, a snapshot in time of where you need to be right now? And that's when Sandro would look and go, oh my God, I need to dial this bit up, or I need to dial that bit down. Or Andy then can then start to look at what are the sacrifices that you need to make in order to achieve some of these. Is it that personal improvement might need to take a bit of a back step at the moment, or do I need to dial that really high up because there's some new learning out there, or we're in COVID and we've got these huge opportunities? Okay, so any other questions around that, because we will come back. So I'll just circle back to some my experience of a family office and the depth and the communication. And one of the things that I'm a massive fan on, and we're going to touch on a bit of communication. And the reason why I thought this would be a really good tool for everybody to try is because I do believe with communication that a lot of it is we have this authenticity sensor. And I imagine most of you have got it as well. It's this, hopefully you've all got the same little voice in the back of your head. I've definitely got it. Makes me worry then when you can't see many people nodding. But there's this voice in the back of your head when you first meet somebody, and your voice is like, oh, why are they relevant? Why do I need to, who's this person? What's going on? And that voice can be calmed with, firstly, a bit of credibility. Oh, I'm a financial advisor, or oh, I've read an interesting book, or oh, I'm a friend of a friend. And then all of a sudden that voice goes, oh, there might be something here. It might be, a BS meter. There might be something in this for me. Then the next bit comes of, what's going on in the world. And I don't think you can fake stuff. So especially being an advisor, as you all are, if you have your world sorted, and I'm not saying 7 out of 7, if you have your world sorted and you are on point, it will come across as confidence, and you will then be able to say to people, what do you want out of life? How can I help you with your money? But I do think that communication bit is really, really key. And we always talked about trying to get our house in order before we can help others. And a lovely analogy that I've heard recently on aeroplanes is that you can't be expected to put the oxygen mask on somebody else until you've got the oxygen mask on yourself. Sort yourself first, and then you can help others. So and what I'm saying by this is this wheel of life is it moves, it flexes, but it allows you to see that you're moving in the right direction, or you're making steps to move it in the right direction. And I promise you, when you then go into a meeting, that positivity that Sandro was talking about, that psyche of, well, I'm growing, I'm getting better, it will come across, it will ooze. People will pick up on it. And I always coach a Maya Angelou quote. She's an American poet. And a lot of times she said, it's not what you did or what you said, it's how you made people feel. And so I coach a lot around those interactions. You're all good enough. You've all got the logic inside to make money and to invest in the right areas. You're all highly trained. I think sometimes we neglect the depth of the relationships, and how that connection, that personal connection, can really, really be powerful. Anything you want to add to that, Sandro?
Apart from the fact that Darcy's very busy, I really appreciate the feedback she's giving us. Would that mean your life balance wheel needs to be in better balance than those you coach? Of course. I mean, as financial planners, let me use that as an example. If my financial house is in order, it's very difficult for me to authentically advise other people. Does that mean that, my personal relationships are bound to or have to be better than everyone I meet? Of course not, because the reality of life is that we all go through peaks and troughs in all different parts of the wheel. But what I would say to Darcy and to all of you is that as long as you are consciously aware, then you have a head start. You are ahead of most of the people that you will ever meet and you will advise, because most people are simply not consciously aware. That's the first thing I would say. And then for those of you who heard my very brief presentation yesterday, and we will cover this again when we start to go into the entire advice piece, which will start next week and will continue for the 7 weeks thereafter. And that really is this whole thing around authenticity and starting a conversation with clients where, my first opening conversation with a client, having done the positioning piece, we'll talk about the positioning piece next week or in week 4. But it's very much about starting with, tell me what you want. And that's almost like this life balance wheel. What is it you want to achieve? Because I tell you what, I'm not a financial advisor who is going to sit here, gather information, and then prescribe something to you, because that's what other financial advisors do. And, if I was to say to all of you, really, really candidly, I was going to ask you to really honestly answer this question. What is the question that you don't want your prospect to ever ask you? And I would say, if most of you thought about this for a few minutes, the majority would come up with the words, what do you do for a living? Because we simply don't want to say, I'm a financial planner. Why? Because people's preconditioning, people's assumptions are, we're probably very transactional. We'll probably sell them something. They'd be lucky if they see us again for another 5 or 10 years. And then only if there's something else to sell them or there's a problem. Now, I know I'm generalizing here, but the reason why I would suggest most people have signed up to this 10-week program is because they see an opportunity, they see ability in themselves, but they look around their community, no disrespect to IG or any of the other people in our profession, but they look around and they kind of go, and I know I do, and I think there's got to be more than this. There's got to be a better opportunity. There's got to be a better way of framing myself and positioning myself, and people seeing me as a truly authentic professional person who wants to go on a journey with these people. I call it hand-holding, rather than just somebody who just sits down, gathers information, and then says, here's what you need, please sign here. And so that really touches on the points that Lee's made, because when I sit down and say to somebody, we're not going to do it the usual way. If you've ever dealt with a financial advisor, and if they haven't, they probably know somebody who has. The reason I do things differently is because I start from a different place. And where I'm starting from tonight is, tell me what you want, Lee. Tell me what you want to achieve in life for your kids. What does retirement look like? what kind of car do you want to drive, or what type of house do you want to live in 5-10 years from now? I haven't asked a fact-finding question yet. I haven't prescribed anything yet. What I've done is started to climb into the mind of my prospect, but engage right brain. And the moment you engage right brain, you have a totally different conversation than when you start saying, how much money do you need in retirement? How much money do you need to pay off your mortgage? Two completely different conversations. And as I said yesterday, I shared this idea 18 months ago with a guy at $1 Million Roundtable, the want versus need conversation, and he doubled his production in 12 months. Just before Christmas, he said to me, literally doubled my production based on just the one idea in terms of repositioning the whole engagement piece with clients. But we will talk about that in due course. I'm not going to steal any more of Lee's thunder, but it does relate very strongly to some of the things that he's been talking about. And what Ryan's just typed, I hate feeling like a salesperson. Well, the good news is at the end of this 10 weeks, you will not feel like a salesperson at all. We will put you in a completely different place in the minds of your prospects, and therefore doors and opportunities will open up more readily.
I mean, that segues me lovely into the bit that I was talking about the real powerful bit. And we'll go right back to the person who said, oh, if only you could change someone's attitude. That's the $1 million question, or the $1 million bit. And how I try to do this kind of thing is to actually check the depths of those relationships. So I mentioned the military earlier, and I mentioned the sport, and then the high performing business teams that I've been involved in and been lucky enough to coach. The difference between those teams is the trust that they have within each other, whether that is off the bat or whether that is grown because they've had their backs against the wall or they've done something. And it then becomes more than just a job. It becomes something very, very meaningful. And how I've brought this alive quite a few times in with companies is I always get two whiteboards and I put them next to each other. And I always say, what are you measured by? What are your bosses measured by? Or if you're the board, how do you know if you're doing a good job? What are you, what's it all about? And of course, they love it. They always come up with return on invested capital, EBITDA. And I normally say, let's go through all the different acronyms. I know you love them. And they sort of say, well, as a sports person, all you care about is winning, don't you? And I always say, no, we're going to get onto this. That's the outcome. The win is the outcome. It's the process that you're going through. So I get them to write all of these different bits: margin, top line, bottom line, growth targets. And then I say to them, right, I want you now, because they are really important. Don't get me wrong. They are measurements and they're super vital. But what I want you to do now is speak to the person on your left, turn to that person and ask them to tell you something that they don't mind sharing, because we're normally in a group, but something that is really, really important to them, is powerful to them, and it means something to them. And you are going to then present that to the group so that we can all learn about that person. And so often in those meetings, you'll get people saying, well, my son or my daughter or my partner or my parents, when I was in childhood, gave me some advice, or a teacher. And then I start to write these up, and you write them on the board, and you start to use real names and experiences and all of this kind of stuff. Then I bring the two boards together and I say, what bit gets you out of bed in the morning? Does the EBITDA, does the bonus for the shareholder, or does it knowing that Kathy's husband isn't well at the moment and they're really, really struggling? Or is it that, this person goes to work every day because he's trying to provide school fees, or, and you get some real detailed stuff. And this is what I say to people. I say, this is important, but this is powerful. And this is a high performing team. This is how you affect someone's attitude. And the story I sort of use to bring this alive in sports terms is I'm very lucky, and I was able to play for a team called the British and Irish Lions. And I'm sorry for those of you that don't necessarily know rugby, but it's 4 nations and it only happens every 4 years. So normally you have your club, you normally have your country, and then once every 4 years, you have 4 nations come together, and they form one team, and it's for 6 weeks. And you normally travel to South Africa, Australia, or New Zealand, what the big sort of superpowers of Southern Hemisphere rugby. And you normally go down there and you have this amazing tour. And it's unique because I always talk about club rugby, where I live every day, is my family. I then say international rugby, there's a few rivalries, but at the end of the day, it's your country and you're passionate. I've got some Aussies and some Sappers giving me some stick in the chat. But the Lions is once every 4 years, and it's with your arch enemies, because you are coming together for 4 weeks with the people that you've never really hung out with, you've never shared a room with, they've only tried to take your head off or beat you up. And then they're asking you to become a team. They're asking you to give all of your IP. So imagine all of your competitors, and you're going to, for 6 weeks, come together as a super financial advisor group, and then you're going to disband, and everybody's got all of your knowledge of how you do things. And at first, because you're competitive, you turn up and you go, yes, this is going to be amazing. I now know if I'm one of the best players in the Northern Hemisphere. You then realize you're surrounded by your arch enemies, and you're going, whoa, okay. It's partly looking forward to the fact that there's no referees in training, so you can settle some scores, but that's beside the point. That's my little angry little man syndrome coming out. But mainly, you are there and you are thinking, how is this going to work? Who's going to do what? And we had a phenomenal leader called Paul O'Connell. And Paul O'Connell had been involved 4 years earlier in the previous tour. And he said we were professional. We were very left brain. We did all of our homework. We did all of our due diligence. We ate the right food. We did the right amount of sleep. But we didn't become mates. We didn't become friends. And he said, and I promise you that some of you will never get to do this tour again. I've got a second opportunity and I want to make a difference. And so he begged us all to sacrifice, like I said, in the P equals C times A squared, sacrifice 20% of your professionalism to become friends. And we basically ended up becoming mates. And the bonds that we created were so much more powerful. And for me, that was a life lesson, because I now look back at those games and that team, knowing the people. I still can pick up the phone and I still remember the names of people's wives and kids. And for me, that's the attitude piece. How did we change the attitude? How did we grow that attitude rather than being selfish? And the surprising thing that happened, which I wasn't expecting, is by giving everybody all of our IP, all of our line out calls and our scrums, the next year, do you think that they stole all of our information and got better than us? Or do you think that everybody had to improve because you had collective knowledge? The collective knowledge was massive. And that's how we slowly but surely were starting to close the gap on the Southern Hemisphere. So for me, these relationships are key. And I think the more that when you go into a meeting, and again, I'll keep banging on about mindset, if you can go into that meeting and you sort of think, what is a good outcome from this meeting? What am I going to get from this meeting? What would be a great outcome from from a meet and greet or a new sales sort of call? If your mindset is, oh, I'm wondering if I can get a few % of that person's investable wealth, they will probably pick that up. Whereas if you are thinking, how can I help this person? How can I get to know them? How can I understand their world? Very quickly, that person, I hope, you will have some people, and I know a few that all they care about is the logic and the money. But I think that the better ones will be the deeper relationships. Am I on the right track there, Sandro?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been keeping one eye on the chat, and a couple of things that have been said. Sam, Stephanie, and Todd, I think. We're going to talk a lot about this next week, actually. This whole repositioning piece. I think I made the point that, I think we all want to be seen. I think we're all very proud of what we do. I said yesterday at Apex, we shouldn't consider the word sales as a swear word. We should be very proud about the fact that we, outside of the medical profession, are probably the only profession that literally changed people's lives. So putting the pride that we have for what we do to one side, how do we overcome that negative perception? And we will talk about this next week, but just to pick up on Sam's point, the thing is, we can do things, we can say things, and whether their negative view of a salesperson comes from within, I would venture to say it's probably based on their life experience. They've probably encountered situations where they have probably not had a good experience at the hands of someone in sales, whether it's car or house or whatever it happens to be. And like all of those other learned experiences in life, we have an emotional attachment to that experience, which we then drag to the next relationship that we look to build. So that's why USP, differentiation, no coincidence that my book was called Dare to Be Different. And it's about lifting yourself out subconsciously, psychologically, from this perception into a different realm where you can communicate more effectively. We don't have the time to go into this deep dive now. We will do it next week. I want to reassure all those of you that have made that point that we will cover that in quite a bit of detail, because if you can't position yourself in the right way, you're not going to be able to explore all these other inherent skills that you undoubtedly have.
Yeah, and I think for me, Sandro, again, it will always come back to you, the person, first, which is why we went with the wheel. There's lots of other really, really good exercises. And in the corporate world, there's the buzzword is EQ, really, and that is your emotional intelligence. So do you understand? And I always break it down to, so do I understand myself and the impact I have on others? Do I understand the mood and how my mood can affect how I think? And then therefore affect others. There's social situations, and there's social awareness. So EQ is another thing that I talk quite a lot about in the corporate world, because it's very much away from the left brain logic. But I do want to go back to us as individuals just for 1 minute as well, talking about getting ourselves in the right situation. Because if we then start to talk about holistic and helping people plan their life, are we looking after ourselves as well? And I think wellness is a bit of a buzzword around at the moment in the world, especially with the pandemic. And I think the wheel is a good way of working out what we need in order to make ourselves feel better, work better, be more efficient. And I was asked a question probably about 3 months ago: what is wellness? And did I know about wellness? And I sort of said, yeah, I've heard it, and I sort of understand it. And I was actually doing a course on it, and I went downstairs to my wife Danielle, and she said, "How's the course going?" And I said, "It's okay. I don't quite understand some of the elements." And she said, "Well, that's because you are, without being rudely, you're an ex-sports person, and you can be the most selfish person in the world." And I said, "What? That's a bit harsh." And she said, no, I'm not saying it in a mean way. She said, "But you've been brought up with the whole idea of eating the right thing, sleeping the right amount of hours, doing the right amount of stretching." And so in my previous world, everything was geared to performance. So you were constantly going, what do I need to do to myself before I can perform? And it was very strange when I went into the corporate world and I found that so many people work and then they go, oh, how do I look after myself? And I'm very lucky to work with someone on the global exec at Ernst & Young. And I remember saying to him, I was like, let's look back at some of your worst meetings. Remember, we spoke right at the beginning about those negative outcomes that continually happen. I was like, when have been your biggest sort of calamity meetings? And he said, "Oh, it's easy, Lee. I can always pinpoint New York. I'd get the red eye over to New York. I'd probably arrive about 7 in the morning. I'd have had a few glasses of wine, not too many, but it's hard in first to turn down the nice red. I'd then go straight into the meeting. Someone had upset me. He's a big guy. He'd blow his top. He'd walk out going, "Oh God, frustration. I hate doing this." And then he'd get on the plane and come back. And he said it's happened 4 or 5 times. And I said, well, let's just break this down. I said, and he loved his rugby. I said, would you pay 150 euros to fly to Australia? Oh, yeah, would you pay 150 euros just off the bat to watch me play in a rugby match in front of 80,000 people, knowing I'd had a few glasses of wine the night before, I hadn't slept, I hadn't ate properly, and I was going around bashing people? He's like, no, what? Now I see what you're saying. And so that self-care bit around getting yourself ready first before going into meetings or performing, if you can change that mindset around it's a performance mindset and I am performing today, then you can really change change how you act. And I get a lot of people pushing back saying, oh, I just can't fit it in, or I just can't. And it's about discipline. For me, a lovely phrase, and if you take anything out of tonight, discipline for me equals freedom. Discipline is freedom. If you are disciplined with your time, guess what you have? Loads of time. If you are disciplined with your food, guess what? On a Saturday, Sunday, you can eat what you want. And so I believe that if you can be disciplined around these types of things, disciplined around learning, you can actually have enough free time to do other things. And I do find sometimes we are very indisciplined. Sandro, have you got a couple of examples of that? Because I know you are very good at sort of doing lots and lots of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think that the important thing to say here is that although this program was created to perhaps share some of our experiences, and mine in particular in terms of my financial services career, to help others avoid some of the challenges that I've had. But I mean, we all bring lots to this table. I think the whole discipline thing is a very good point. Again, I've had the privilege of interviewing on my podcast a lot of very, very successful people. And what's really interesting, it is the word, apart from passion, by the way, I hear passion a lot. And that's why I started last week by asking everyone, how serious are you about success? Because if you're on this program thinking I'm 10 out of 10, or in the life balance wheel 7 out of 10, but whatever the top score is in your world, it's got to be that. You've got to be prepared to say, I see the brick wall, how fast do you want me to run at this? You've got to be really serious. As clients have got to be really serious about doing something in relation to their financial planning in order to become clients. In my particular world, I'm not always disciplined. I mean, it's fair to say that I'm not a machine. That there are times where, frankly, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes I question why I'm still doing this, this godforsaken job, and have those conversations with myself on a surprisingly regular basis, because I'm a human being. I'm built of exactly the same things as we all are. But one thing I know about success in this business, and I said it last week and I'll repeat it several times again, is that if you don't have discipline, which of course is painful, getting up at the early hours of a wet, cold winter's morning to go to the gym is all about discipline. That's not about passion. That's not about desire. That's not about, this preconceived outcome. That's just pure, simple discipline and nothing else. But because it's become a habit now, it's less painful than it was a year ago. A year ago, it was awful doing it for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And I moaned like hell to my trainer and I wanted to give up a dozen times. Now, if I go a day without going to the gym, I get miserable. It's really amazing how, when you go through that process of a learned experience and you embed it so it becomes subconscious, you actually start to miss it. So the discipline then starts to work the other way around, because now, it would take a lot of discipline for me to pull myself away from the activity, which 12 months ago I actually hated. And I mentioned last week that if you don't have discipline, then you're going to have regret. As I said before, I know lots of people who are very well educated, but failures in the business. I know loads of people with the biggest prospect lists I've ever seen that haven't got a meeting in their diary for the next 3 months. Loads and loads and loads of examples. So yes, there are days, Lee, when I kind of look at my diary and don't want to make the calls. There are times when, I know I should be really focused on a particular subject. It's urgent, it's important, it has to get done. And then lo and behold, something flashes up on my phone. It's an email from a client who says, any chance you could do this straight away for me? And I drop what I'm doing and I turn my attention to that. Does it ever lead to a better outcome? No. I feel better about myself for about 10 minutes afterwards. And then I spend the rest of the day beating myself up because I've allowed myself to get distracted. And when I'm working at my optimum level, when I'm 7 out of 7 in my, my personal performance wheel, then and we'll talk about compartmentalizing and a little system I use next week. And once I think you bring something like that into your daily life and into your working practices, I think you have the ability to shine, to perform at a much greater level. Because I truly believe, and I know you would support me on this, Lee, there isn't a single person on this program that isn't capable of significantly more. I include you on that. I include me in that. There isn't a single person here with us today that isn't capable of 3 or 4 times more than they're doing, whether that's being a better husband or wife, whether it's about being, a better business person, a better leader, a better salesperson, whatever we want to call ourselves. We all have the ability to do an awful lot more. And actually, some of these little tweaks that we need to make in order to progress that next level are actually really easy to implement. But you need the Lees, the Sandros, the colleague sat next to you, your line manager, your wife, your husband, your significant other, to be there to constantly make sure that you are staying really focused on these important areas. But over the next 10 weeks, you will get every single answer to every single question. But the one bit we can't do is to put them into practice for you, of course. And that's the key action point, which Lee, you know only too well.
Yeah, and I would definitely sort of resonate with you around the down days. You will have down days, and this is where I think society at the moment, if you look, and I don't want to get preachy, but if you look, we are probably the wealthiest we've ever been in history, yet we've got more mental illnesses. I think because we think that with Instagram and all these social medias, everyone's living the best life and everything's great and the whole world's amazing. But actually, you've got to have down days. It's like I mentioned earlier with the tennis analogy. If you don't lose, if you don't put yourself out there, the buzz of, if you go to 10 high net worth clients and you get knocked back by 9, the buzz that you'll get from the one big one will outweigh the other stuff, rather than, well, I've managed to knock off a few little ones. So I think you just have to accept those bad days, knowing that if you've had a bad day, you can have a good day, and that resilience of how you get out of those. And someone mentioned earlier, I saw in the chat that about stoicism and journaling. And I think sometimes keeping a journal, if you are having a few back-to-back bad days, journaling and remembering the good bits and why you got into what you did and the great clients that you do have and that those kind of things, it can really drag you out of that mire. And it probably leads me into my next bit, which I think is quite key, and I suppose it picks up on earlier. And I know you've covered a bit on mindset, but it's something I'm really sort of passionate about. Is our mind can either be our best adversary or it can be our worst enemy. And if you believe in evolution, we were low on the food chain. We are constantly worried about what's going to eat us, what's going to take us out as cavemen and women. So we are wired for danger. And it's unfortunate that the world's gone like that and our brain is still slowly catching up. And so you will see people now talk about stress and I'm really stressed. And if you go, get quite scientific on it, stress is actually a really bad hormone that is there it's released when you are in serious danger. And you've seen people rip cars off doors because there's been a car crash and their baby's inside, superhuman strength, or they've had to run to get out of danger. That's the stress hormone leaking into your system, giving you amazing physical attributes. However, we've turned pressure, performance pressure, which is this meeting going to go well? I've got to give a presentation. I've got to get through my emails because I've got a lot of work on. And we've changed it for stress. And stress for me is about keeping you alive. Pressure is about performance and how do you to deal with that. And we can actually help our brains to, one, choose between the two, but also start to use it in our favor. And so I use a technique called RAS, Reticular Activating System. It's your RAS. And the RAS picks up 40,000 bits of information, I think it is, don't quote me, but it's in the tens of thousands. Bits of information at any 1 second. It's constantly picking bits up and your brain is filtering it. And it will help you find the bits that are relevant to you, the bits that you're thinking about, the bits that you need. And so a couple of examples of this are, if you've ever bought a new car and all of a sudden you're driving that car down the road and you go, oh, whoa, someone's got the same color car as me. I never saw so many of the same makes of cars or the same shoes or trainers. Or I did it when my wife was first pregnant. I was sort of going, crikey, how many pregnant people are around? And it's because your brain is going, that's relevant. You need to see that. You need to see that. And so your brain will help you if you tell it what you want, which again goes right back to my first coaching piece. Where do I want to be? Or what do I want, as Sandro said? If you know what you want, your brain will help you find, and it will give you opportunities to get there, because you may be missing those opportunities. Richard Branson, the entrepreneur, he always sort of says, these ideas, these businesses, they just find me. But it's because he's wired to be an entrepreneur. He's wired for opportunities. With clients, if you say to yourself, right, I'm looking for these types of clients, and not just think it, write it down. Because again, the power of the pen that I mentioned earlier, make yourself believe it, your brain will actually go, oh, there's an opportunity. And this happens all the time. Hopefully you can resonate with the car analogy. But I'll just give you a live example of me. So I was off on tour to South Africa, and my washing machine broke, and I was literally on my way to the airport, and my wife was ringing me in the background going, you cannot leave this house with a broken washing machine. I've got 3 kids. What are you going to do? And I was thinking, oh my God, I need to get this fixed. I need to get, to sort this out. And for me to get to the motorway in the UK, it's probably about a 3-mile journey. And I've walked, believe me, if you ask me to navigate via pubs, I know Bath very well. And I've walked down this road 150 times, 200 times. And as I'm driving, all of a sudden I see washing machine repair shop. I've never even noticed that washing machine repair shop's there. Literally it's not even in my radar. But all of a sudden, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking repair, wife, I spot something. And I do think the more that you can use this to help you, the better you'll be. So it's called the RAS, your Reticular Activating System. And I think what this all linked nicely to is, I know Sandro got you last week to start to write down your goals and to get as many goals as you can on the cards. By writing them down, by getting them out there, by constantly seeing them day after day, your brain will help you find these bits. It will filter those 40,000 bits of information. Sandro, any comments on that?
No, you stole my thunder. I was just about to say, and that is exactly the reason we started last week with the mind changers, because without them, unless you can get your reticular activation system focused on success, achievement, outcomes, relationships and all those things, it's very, very difficult to introduce all the skills that you're going to be, that we're going to be sharing, to really get those to be working as efficiently as we would otherwise want them. If you simply hand somebody a toolkit of ideas to help them become more productive in financial services, but you don't have the RAS, if you don't have the filter in place, then it becomes a conscious battle. And, you know, as we all know, we've heard it on the chat tonight, this afternoon, on plenty of occasions, people are always going to struggle. You're always going to have that inconsistency. You saw it on a slide last week as almost like the way the stock market works. You know, you start off in a place where you go, today's going to be a great day. I've got a full diary of meetings, really, really looking forward to the day. I'm absolutely buzzing. This is the best industry to be in. 3 of them cancel, and all of a sudden it's not such a great place to be all of a sudden. And then we end up back where we started. So if we can bring that filter into play, you're going to start to see that line, the line that drifts above the median to somewhere below the median, then back up again on that really inconsistent journey, which is frustrating for most of us. You'll start to see that line flatten out, and that's when you're performing at your optimum level. And no apologies whatsoever for spending such a lot of time on this. Normally, when I do a 2-day masterclass program, this one is being created purely for you guys and ladies. But usually, when I just do a fairly basic one for most salespeople, primarily in the Far East, half of the first day is spent on mindset. 25% of the whole program is spent on mindset, because without it, you are simply not going to make the progress that I've promised you will make under the guarantee that we talked about last week. So, yeah, I would endorse everything you've just said. I'm also going to throw in the fact that I'm a bit disappointed with Brian Wanner's team, that they made coffee for themselves and not for us.
So, and I am conscious because obviously, you know, we're coming to the last half an hour, but if anybody's got any stuff that they struggle with, I call them blockers. What's blocking you? What happens time and time again that gets in the way of you performing at your best? Because I'm more than happy to work through a few of those bits. So if you do put into the chat, have a think about what are those cycles that keep giving me those negative outcomes. And if you put some of those in the chat, I'll start to weave in and find out how I can address some of those for you as well. But let's stay on that mindset, Sandro, as well, because I think talking about your RAS, and we mentioned earlier how those, you know, your mind filters the information. I think there's also some other bits around. We live subconsciously now as well. So we do a lot of stuff automatically, and sometimes we do too much. And that's what means that our brains can take over. So when I say subconsciously, it's around the can falling out of a cupboard and you catch it automatically. These are the kind of things that you can really you can really sort of can cause you trouble, because if you don't pick through it, your brain, as I've said already, is wired to keep you safe. Don't do that. Or what would happen? Or this could happen. And so what we tend to do is we try and get you to slow down and to think through, what's the logic behind this? Is this my brain's, is this an opportunity that my brain's saying, oh, if you fail what? Oh, I haven't got that far. Because all your brain's saying is don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So we do need to test some of the assumptions that we're making sometimes when our brain is holding you back. Because logically it's not, you know, it's okay, brain. And you can say to yourself, it's a bit weird, you're not supposed to talk to yourself out loud, but you can actually say to your mind, I'm not in danger, you're not keeping me safe, it's okay, it's a challenge, it's performance, I'm under pressure, not stress.
Lee, can I just jump in? I mean, the chat's been going mad, which is fantastic. I want to ask you as a sports person, and the reason I'm saying this is to all those of you who've shared this. I won't quote names because the chat's moving so quickly, but we are going to talk about transforming first impression. We are going to talk about how to control the highs. That's a really good question, because I heard it earlier on in the chat, or saw it rather. Lee, as a professional sports person and a very successful one, I mean, you played in a fantastically successful England side, and a Lions side, and Bath were the champions of England. So how do you, as a high performance athlete in your particular case, how do you maintain high levels of performance? Because, you know, we've all fallen into the trap of making a fantastic sale. It's probably 25% of our annual turnover. You know, we're metaphorically, you know, dancing a jig for the next 3 weeks. But then we've got to go out there again tomorrow. And a lot of us do fall into the trap of just taking our foot off the gas for a while and we coast. How do you maintain consistently high levels of performance?
Yeah, and I struggled with this one personally when I was playing early on, because as a youngster, all you want to do is you want to get in the team. You're like, right, I'll do anything. I've got to be in the team. I've got to be in the team. I just want to be the best. And then and some wiser old heads used to laugh at me and say, hey, it's not about just getting in the team. Once everyone knows who you are and how you operate, it's about staying in the team. And for me, it was then around the process. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Is that client, the win, was that as a result of you being amazing, or was it a result of you sticking to a process, and a good process, and being disciplined? We mentioned it earlier around that process. And by doing your job really, really well, by preparing, by delivering, then the results will take care of themselves. So yes, you're going to have an amazing high, but what you've got to try to not to do is go, yes, I'm amazing. How well have I done? You've got to go, whoa, what's the process? And if your goal, your SMART goal that you spoke about in the first week was to hit a client, celebrate, pat yourself on the back, because it's amazing. But also don't forget that it was the process, and review what went well. So something we learned quite a lot from the RAF, the military pilots, is they review every mission, good or bad. And I found going into business a lot, people would often review why they didn't win a client, but they didn't always review why they did win the client. What did it go really well? What did we really do better? You know, what do we need to keep? Because that was amazing. And then what do we need to to get rid of and not do again? Because again, you can always improve, and it's so much easier to improve when you're winning than when you're constantly losing, because then you get into the desperation, the need, and then obviously you find it even harder, because like we said earlier, if you're feeling desperate, if you're feeling nervous, it will come across.
Lee, again, I really appreciate people like Stephanie and Brian and Zane all being really candid. It's fantastic that you're all opening up with some really honest thinking, actually, and sharing some of the challenges that you face. What I can promise you is that the reason why this is structured in the way that it is that despite the fact that we have a structure, obviously, to make sure we get all of the salient points covered over the 10 weeks, we will be fluid enough to be able to answer all these questions. So if you'll allow me to, Zane, Stephanie, Brian, all those that have asked questions around goals, overcoming highs, how do you recover from mistake, how do you approach friends and family, particularly, I think Mike it was that quoted, you know, don't speak to Mike because he'll try and sell you something. I promise you, we will cover all of those things, and everyone will come away with a script, a process. But exactly as Lee says, this is a process-driven program. What will happen is, whether you have a fantastic win or a catastrophic loss, you simply stick to the process, because it will get you back onto that, that treadmill, if that's the right word. Because interestingly, I don't know, 10 years ago, if I made $1 million sale, if I sold an investment for $1 million, I would be euphoric. I mean, for days and days, sometimes months. Now, if I make $1 million sale, I'm kind of like, you know, it's $1 million. It's kind of disappointing that it wasn't 5. And so what will happen over time is you'll set your bar ever high, but you've got to have that process in place. Know that you go into every meeting and you are going to perform at your very highest level. And the only way you lose is if the client is not in a position to become a client. That's really, really important. So in other words, if it doesn't work out, it's not because of you, it's because of the client. And I'm going to give you a real philosophical view of that, and this process, that if you stick to it, you will never suffer rejection. That will be my third guarantee. I gave you 2 last week. Guarantee of this week is, if you follow this process, you will never suffer rejection again, which in dealing with how do I make a mistake? How do I deal with the euphoric highs and the lows and the friends and the family and all those other questions? We will deal with all of those. So, and well done to Peter, past CFP in February. That's fantastic news. Sorry, Lee, back to you.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm still sort of mulling over that that high as well, the euphoric high. But again, I think that goes back to what we said right at the beginning, and I know you'll cover it in future. But if your ultimate mindset is, how am I going to help this person, rather than am I landing a sale, have I got a percentage of their wealth? If in your mind you're constantly thinking, how can I help? I'm curious, I want to know more about this person. Then I think your mindset changes around making notes, because it's not just something you have to do. It's, notes will really help me on my next thing, to dig deeper, to make it more meaningful. Or do you know what I mean? I think if you can really invest in the person, and the example I was going to use, because I'd never thought I'd have seen this before, but I was lucky enough to work with a brain surgeon, and he was as left-brained and clinical as you could think. And we were talking about this around performance, and he ended up, and he's so unique, and it makes me laugh. But what he would almost do going into a surgery, because it's super fine margins, it was super delicate, he would actually do a little bit of mindfulness beforehand, listen to a song, get himself in the right mood. But he would talk to his team, and he would be saying, right, everybody, we've got Bob on the table here. Bob's got a wife. He's got 2 grandkids. I met him before, and he still likes to play a bit of golf. He's hoping that he can swing the club after this. And he really made the whole thing mean something. He wasn't just going in there and hacking someone's brain to pieces. He was going in delicately, because he was trying to create the picture of this person, so it meant something. He was putting that emotional connection in, which made it more powerful than just another patient. And lo and behold, his statistics went through the roof, because it meant more to him, as opposed to, this is just a job, I'm just cutting somebody open. So again, I think the more you can make it mean something, change your mindset. Again, trick your brain, make it think sometimes the pressure's on, sometimes it's not on. You can definitely do those types of things. So from that, I just wanted to sort of talk about a couple of other bits, Sandro. One thing I think we covered around change in behaviors, and it is change. And I'm hoping today you've got some really good stuff out of it. And some of it will be repeated, and some of it you'll take away in your practice and it won't work for you. But I want you to continually try stuff, keep trying and trying, because again, from failures often come our biggest successes. And it took me a while when I was being coached to understand how we actually learn. So I thought it might be useful today to talk about how you cement learning, and why it is so difficult. And so there's 4 stages of learning, and I'll actually get the slide up, Sandra, because I think, bear with me 1 second, I think I'll explain it a little bit easier. So can everybody, sorry, I just need thumbs up so that I know if people can see this.
We're good, Lee.
Right, perfect. So 4 stages of learning. When you're learning something, it happens this way. Normally, it's a skill that you haven't, you didn't know you need it. It's not in your armory. Why? And we'll talk about feedback after this. But all of a sudden, someone said to you, if you do this, it will help you. So you go, oh, brilliant. I didn't know it. So I was unconsciously incompetent. You do not know what you do not know. Whether that is, I don't know the effect I have on people, whether it is, I don't know how to drive, and I've never had to learn. But this is the first stage of learning. So unconscious incompetence, you don't know. And I'll give an example of this where I was coaching a chief exec, and he had he interrupted people. His brain was really fast. He was always thinking about things. And so whenever anyone tried to talk or they were talking, he'd basically finish their sentence off because he knew what they were going to say and he was in a rush. And so it was brought to him via feedback that this happens, and people don't really enjoy it. And he was like, no, I don't do that. No, don't be silly. I've got lots of time for my staff. I like them all. So unconsciously incompetent. He then got onto the second stage, which is conscious incompetence. So we'd given him the feedback. He still didn't really know about it until he went home and he spoke to his wife, and she's like, yes, you do it all the time. And he was like, no way. And then a few days later, I get a phone call going, oh my goodness, Lee, this is ridiculous. This happens all the time, and I can't control it. I even know about it, but I couldn't stop myself. I was still doing it. And I said, yeah, that's fine. You are now consciously, you know it, but you can't control it. You're still incompetent. So then we go on to the third stage, and this is where we all fall down, me included, everybody. This is the hardest, conscious competence. Now, hopefully most of you have passed your driving test. How much brain power did it take the first time you had to drive? Once learned and you were in the flow, you had to really concentrate on the gears. You were worried about cars coming past. You were all this new horrible feeling. And it happens with everything. If you're changing your golf swing, if you're changing, the way you work, process, this is why we hate change, because it's so tiring. But if you go back to Sandro's thing of going to the gym, roughly 60 days, they say, continually doing stuff will then flow into unconscious competence, which is where you don't have to think about it anymore. You're in the flow, you do it naturally. You drive your car, and sometimes you even get to your destination and you go, whoa, how did I get here? Those are the 4 stages that you have to go through. And that third stage is the real hard stage. That's that discipline bit around, I will stick with this, the benefits are there, I will come out the other side.
And Lee,
and it also...
Sorry, Lee, if I can just jump in to frame what's coming in the next few weeks, that is a perfect segue to week 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. 9 is going to be quite a bit more fluid, but with great respect, most of us right now are probably, for the vast majority of us, in certain aspects of our business, and we only have to look at the chat to know that this is the case. For many of us in different aspects of our business, we are consciously incompetent. We know what the problem is. I haven't got enough meetings in my diary. I don't suffer rejection very well. My work-life balance is all out of kilter, but we don't know how to do something about it. Where we're going to get you to is unconscious competence across all those disciplines. But the reason why the homework is there, action plan, and the reason why to fulfill the guarantee, you have to pass through section 3, which is to consciously become competent. And, I remember taking my driving test, learning to drive. I also, some years later, did an advanced driving test. If you've ever done it, you will know that you do commentary driving, and you have to literally provide a commentary as you drive. Now, talking a lot has always come quite naturally to me, as you probably have guessed by now, but actually doing this behind the wheel of a car with somebody sitting next to you is really, really difficult. But the key to learning, the key to getting to wherever it is we want to get to, we have to pass through number 3 to get from 2, which is where many of us are now in different aspects of our business, to number 4, which is that optimum performance piece. And that is why we are absolutely hammering this whole mindset, build the right foundation piece, because unless that happens, we will not get to 4.
Yeah, and that's that process. then you are in the, every meeting, you're going to it, you can adapt, because, and somebody asked me, I think in the chat earlier, about confidence. Confidence comes from repetition, because once, what your brain's doing is it's saying to you, oh, this could happen, that could happen, this could happen. Once you've got your process sorted, you relax, and then you're able to field. And you'll all know, I mean, I'm talking to experienced people here, but you'll know that when you're in flow, when you're calm, you're relaxed, someone can chuck an absolute curveball at you, and because you're in your process, you can go, oh, I can take that. Whereas if you're nervous and you're under pressure and then they chuck a curveball, it's almost overload. I can't think. Oh, my mouth's gone dry, I'm stuttering. And so it's the process to keep going, that discipline to just keep doing the things that work, and review. So I've got two last bits, and I'll just stop sharing so I can see everyone. The other bit that is the highlight, and this is a lovely exercise, and Sandra, hopefully you'll back me up on this one, because I think you really like this. But one thing I've noticed with financial advisors and in this area, to get to that unconscious incompetence at times, and I'd say for a big area of the corporate world, feedback is not something that is overly welcomed. And I mentioned it earlier about those reality shows where, you've got people going, give me more, that hunger for feedback, and getting involved in that feedback loop. And one of the things I hope you don't mind me sharing, Sandro, but I encouraged Sandro to send, I actually sent the text out on behalf of him, but you can do it yourself, because it is quite nice to get the feedback. And I got Sandro to send these 5 questions, really short, really sharp, 5 questions. He gave me the numbers to about 8 or 9 of his either clients, friends, people in his network that would really give good feedback. And you set the stage and you say, look, I don't want any of your time. This is for Sandro. I'm just really trying to help him, to grow. Because when you say the word help, people love to help, and sometimes we feel weak asking for help, and we can probably go into that if anyone's interested. But you basically say, look, I'm really trying to help Sandro, so could you just answer these 5 questions for me, and just send them back to me, and then I forwarded them on to Sandro, or send them to Sandro direct. And I think most of them went back to you direct because they were so pleased to be asked, because people like to help. And those questions, you'll get given them, but I'll read them out just quickly. But it was, when I say the name Sandro, what do you think of first? Or if you're doing it for yourself, when you hear my name, what comes up? What thoughts and feelings come up? Then, what's this person's greatest qualities, skills, experiences, and gifts? What would you miss if Sandro wasn't around anymore? What are his development areas? What should he really focus on to improve his game? What could really help him improve? And if you could get an anonymous message to Sandro, just that quick snippet when he's under pressure to him, imagine he's in a game, or imagine he's just walking in to see a client. If you could get an anonymous bit of advice, what would that advice be? And again, I imagine most of you, when I mention feedback, went, oh, I don't want feedback. But those are questions that are eliciting strengths. They are finding what you really, they're trying to help you, but also so often we're better off working on our strengths, what we're really good at, than we are on our weaknesses. And it's a real, say, Sandra, what was that like as an experience for you?
Well, just to let you know, I think is it Charbs 1. The questions are coming out to you. They are already formatted for you. They will come out to you as part of the with the recording and everything else that goes with it post session. But let me share this with you. It felt really uncomfortable when Lee said, I'm gonna send these questions out to a group of people, and I chose 2 of my siblings, I chose 5 clients, and a lawyer friend of mine. And it wasn't because, for no particular reason, I just thought they'll probably play the game, they'll probably all reply. But what was really, really remarkable is every single one of them, Lee, tell me if this isn't true, every single one of them said exactly the same thing. Exactly. Every one of them, without prompting. The 5 questions were answered. Okay, the words were different, but the meaning was exactly the same. I was told Sandro gives up far too much of his time. He's far too generous. He doesn't need to do as much as he does. Honestly, every single one of them. And I learned so much about myself, because going back to your chief executive analogy, the story that you shared a moment ago, Lee, sometimes you just get so wrapped up in your world that you don't actually take time to step back and go, okay, you know, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? What can I afford to do more of? And what can I afford to do less of? And this whole time thing that I hear from people saying, I haven't got enough time. You have got enough time, unless you carry on doing all the things that you're doing. Because the reality is, if you direct your energies, and you articulated it really well, Lee, and we are going to talk about this in the coming weeks. If I were to draw a line on a piece of paper with +10 at one end and -10 at the other, and 0 being the fulcrum, and I was to say to you, give yourself a score out of 10 for your sales ability, let's call it that, you might score yourself a 7. Let's give yourself a score for, I don't know, administration and admin ability. You might give yourself a -3. But where do you think most people spend all of their energy? The reality is, in the society in which we live, we're asked to, or we focus on the things we don't feel that we're very good at. And if you spent as much time trying to turn the +7 into a +10 as you do turning the -3 into a 0, you'd be world class. You would be world class. So sometimes let's just accept we're not good at certain things. That's what you delegate. But if you can really focus on finding out what's going to make you world class, and we focus on that for the next 10 weeks and for the 26 weeks beyond, I promise you, every single person on this program will become world class.
That's what I like. And I'm just going to leave you with one more thing before I do a bit of a recap. And if you can just put in the chat, I'd love to know 1 or 2 takeaways that you're going to take away from today, just so that I know I've landed it. But one last piece, and it came out of Harvard, this, and you may have heard it, but it's when you're focusing and you're trying to find the things that really make a difference, like Sandro said about those strengths, is this Harvard professor basically got his class together, and he said, have you all heard the jar analogy? And half the class had heard it before and half the class didn't. And the jar analogy is basically, he gets 5 pebbles and he puts the 5 pebbles in the jar and he says, is the jar full? Now, the people that know this exercise quite rightly were saying no, and the other half are like, I think so. And he said, no, it's not full. You can get gravel. He then grabbed the scoop and he started to sprinkle the gravel over the top of the stones, and he shook the jar. And he said, is it full now? The group that knew it said, no, you can fit more in. You can fit sand. Quite cleverly, he said, yeah, you can put more in. You can put sand. Is it full now? The group that didn't know it were like, oh, definitely. The group that knew it, no, you can put water. Exactly. And he poured some water in and he had this full jar. And then he said to them, but what is the life lesson? And this is where he stumped the group that knew it, because they said, well, just when you think you can fit more into your world, you can actually squeeze more in. And he said, no, that is not the analogy. The life analogy is, if you don't put those pebbles in first, those 5 important things, the most important things for you, you will put all the other stuff in and you will never get them back in. Focus on those 5 things first, then take care of the other stuff. And for me, that's a really good way of focusing on the big things, the key deliverables, the things that are going to make a difference for you. And then I suppose just a bit of a recap, and I thank you so much for the stuff in the chat. But coaching, why? Bring it into your life, whether you start coaching people or whether you do see an external coach. Good to great. Go from where you are to where you want to be. And what are those steps on the way? Corporate athlete, look after yourself first before you put mask on others. Communication, Maya Angelou, remember, it's not what you did or what you said, it's how you make people feel. And your brain is your biggest advocate. Take it with you, use it, and hopefully that's helped. Oh, and the attitude. Someone's just helped me out. Attitude, yeah, your attitude equals your altitude. I do like that one.
Lee, that was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll see you later on in the program, I'm sure. Thank you to all of you. How did you manage to type that so quickly? But there you are. There's the 5 questions. I knew he'd step up to the plate because he's just so competitive. So thank you to all of you who have contributed via the chat. I'm just gonna end today with a kind of a special announcement, and the special announcement is it's a personal one, because I am now really, really excited about the journey we are going to go on from next week, because from session 3, this is where I get to be at my best. This is where I'm working in my +8, +9, because what I would like to share with you over the coming weeks is the entire process, from how do we find new prospects? It doesn't matter whether they are friends and family, former work colleagues, and all the other things that you come across that prevent you from making those calls, right the way through to the positioning piece, that is differentiating yourself. And one thing that I really want to impress upon you is that from next week, all of you are going to change places with your clients. Now, what I mean by that is, because this is a very important piece to understand, is that most of us, when we're sitting in a prospect, a new client situation, there is the little voice that I mentioned in week 1, that Lee's mentioned again today, that's whispering in our ear, oh, don't get rejected. This isn't going very well, or, you know, the highs and the lows that we've already experienced. I'm going to take you to a place where the client will be asking you to take them on as a client, not you metaphorically begging them to become a client. And there's a very, very simple process that will help you to take control of every client meeting, to the extent that, as I mentioned before, when you come across a new prospect, there is only one reason that you will not do business with them, and that is because they are not in a position at the moment to do business with you. We are going to start that next week. You will have that as part of your toolkit. We will not leave, to use the stone analogy, we will not leave a stone unturned on the journey from onboarding a client to providing a world-class service and to creating ultimately a business where you do not have to find another prospect, they will come to you. So if that doesn't give you a good enough incentive to join us next week, then I think we probably all need to go home and go and have that beer as one of, I love the feedback. There was one person who was honest enough to say there's always time or room for a beer, which is definitely the most honest piece of feedback, Lee, for sure. But mindful, cognizant of the fact that we are all busy, respectful of your time. I want to make sure we do finish on time. Thank you all very much for attending. We will get the relevant material. Please look out for the embedded link in the in the email that comes out to you over the weekend. It is a WeTransfer link. So a couple of you said, didn't get the video. You did. It's an embedded WeTransfer link simply because of the size of the file. But if you still can't find it, when you receive the doc, simply send me an email and we'll resend it to you on its own in an email to make sure you get it. But there will be all the materials. There will be the homework. This is your last week in which we're going to take it nice and easy with you with regard to homework. So make sure you're ready to really get your teeth stuck into some serious success-based work from next week. So have a great one. Have a lovely weekend. And we look forward to seeing you next Friday. And Lee will probably be back with us sometime later in the program. But thank you all for attending. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in a week from now.
Thank you. Thank you.